välkomna till det första föredraget. Welcome to the first lecture here on the first day of the festival, on the Nordic Song Festival. We are so proud and very, very happy to introduce you to our composer in residence this year, Helgi R. Ingvarsson. And he will tell you about his music and the opera, maybe, yes, that we will experience today, later today, this night at 6 o'clock, which also will be streamed. So I give the word to you now, Helgi, and thank you for coming. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Helgi, and I'm an Icelandic composer. It's a real honor to be here, to be this year's composer in residence. Really fun, and good to see you all here. If you have any questions during my talk, just raise your hand and we'll have a little chat. It's very informal. I'll have some slides, we'll listen to some tracks, read some music. Hopefully very relaxed and nice. And the microphone's so loud I can speak in my quiet voice. Okay. I'm going to go through the pieces that are presented here in the festival. And we'll start with the opera, like Gitta said, performed tonight in this space and tomorrow. We have a set here to look at and enjoy, called Music and the Brain. And just a little bit about where we come from and who we are. Last year it was premiered at, sort of official premiere here in Reykjavik in 2021. We were very lucky to get nominated for Gríman Award, which gives an award for originality or outstanding innovation, which we were very happy with. And then, of course, we're performing here in Trollhättan. And then in September we'll be in London, and then in October we'll be in Liverpool. This is very exciting. Before our premiere in Reykjavik last year, we did these sort of work-in-progress performances in London and Iceland, which with an experimental piece like this is very necessary to sort of see how it actually functions in the space, because there are so many moving parts in an opera, like I'm sure you all know. Then we have Gunnar. He is teaching at this festival as well, and he'll be performing tonight. And let's just read together the synopsis for this opera. So the opera addresses the neurological and emotional effects that music can have on us. It is inspired by the writings of neurologist Oliver Sacks, especially his book Musicophilia. And it tells the story of the singer whose successful career has been cut short by an accident. The resulting brain injury has caused her to lose the ability to comprehend music and perform. She's treated by the doctor, which is sung by Gunnar, who, as well as being a fan of the singer, hopes that his research on this rare and interesting case will redeem him in the eyes of the academic community. As they both grapple with trying to understand the singer's condition, questions regarding the nature of music arise. What is music? Is it neurological? Is it emotional? What happens in the musical brain when things fall apart? Like I'm sure we all know, music is a little bit of both, of course. But the doctor is nearly out of time. His big presentation is coming up and he needs to present his findings no matter what. So it's an opera about singing, it's about music, so it's a kind of a meta piece. And then what's interesting to me, most interesting to me as a composer in this piece is the recitative. And I did my doctorate at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and there I was looking at a way for me how I could create a recitative that also had active accompaniment. And I'll explain all of that in detail as we go along. But let's just start, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Traditionally, the recitative is used for moments in opera where the story needs to be moved forwards. The story is able to be moved effectively forwards because the musical accompaniment takes a step back so that text or the story can take priority. And I called this open operas, these sort of recitatives. I will call it for that today, just to call it something. So in open operas, I wanted to try to create a recitative that was dramatically flexible, like recitatives normally are, but at the same time had active accompaniment. And I'll explain that. Any questions at this point? All good? Nice. Here we have Rannveig Káradóttir. She sang the role of the singer when we did our trial performance of the first version of the piece in London. So an open opera is a style of recitative where the timing of drama is always free, but the music is fixed. So you can play around with the story, but the music still stays the same. We'll keep that in mind as we go forward. And at the same time, the musical accompaniment, while the singer is performing, it doesn't rest and it doesn't stop like most traditional recitatives. It stays active. Yes, and just to emphasize that this is not an improvised opera, because all the material is composed and is ready-made, but how we arrange it as a group is up to grabs a little bit. And just to prep the way for this open recitative, let's look at some traditional pieces. Don Giovanni, Mozart. Here we have a section from Act 1, Scene 3. Here we don't have active accompaniment in this recitative, quite traditional. We have the top line where the accompaniment is the held F sharp going then to a G. In that time, the singer can deliver this line in terms of timing and tempo and drama in a way that sort of suits the character, the singer, the director, etc. And the orchestra just waits, rests. And then we have a similar thing going forward into the next system. And then there's a complete rest, just with these little chord jabs from the orchestra in the rests between sentences, with commas, etc. Does anybody know this by heart? This famous roll? Does anybody know it? Just to give us a little insight into how it sounds. We have some singers in the hall, right? No. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. You never know. Sometimes singers just sort of they need to do it. If they know it, that's absolutely fine. So what did I write here? Pretty much what I just said, isn't it? Exactly. The accompaniment steps back and allows the soprano to shape the panicking emotion that's happening. And pretty traditional, I'd say. But please, if you don't agree, you can always raise your hand. We can have a little conversation. That's always absolutely fine. Yes, so here we have free drama timings, but not active accompaniment. Okay. Cincinnati Passion. Similar thing happening. Free vocal line, little chordal jabs in between. And I wrote a lot of text for this, but it's a bit self-explanatory, isn't it? In these cases where the accompaniment stops or rests, the dramatic freedom of the vocal lines is easily achieved, since the accompaniment is full of rests and relatively simple figurative bass. Here we do not have active accompaniment, since during the solo's performance the accompaniment mostly rests, but we have free drama. Okay. And then the last example before we go into music in the brain, it's Wagner. Ooh, that's a lot of text. Okay, that's fine. Those who want to read, they can read. That's absolutely fine. So very active accompaniment here. The orchestra, there's a lot happening. It's the weather or the ocean, isn't it? That's sort of being represented in the orchestra. It's full of power, full of movement, during which time we have the singer trying to sort of break through the music with their lines breaking through the roar of the ocean, isn't that? Isn't that what is happening? I think so. And it's a very powerful piece, a lot happening in the music, but the drama timings are absolutely fixed because it is the accompaniment is active. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, not at all. I was just curious to see how I could achieve both at the same time. The singer has to, like on the second bar in the second system, on the third beat, has to sing that note, Tristan, with the conductor, 1, 2, Trist, can't just take any kind of pause or movement there, which musically, of course, fine. I was just interested in finding a solution to doing it differently. So, first time I tried something like that was in this opera called Brauth, but the English title would be something like Melting. It's quite fun. We had a big block of ice on the stage, and during the performance there was a friend of mine just wearing a latex overall with a pickaxe, and he broke it down as the piece progressed to sort of signify melting of glaciers and that sort of thing. And we have, the orchestra is playing after a traditional score, so it's completely fixed in time. I'm just conducting it as normal. Meanwhile, the singer has these 9 mobiles, and she can sing them at any time. So this was an experiment. We just said, we're just going to play this, and you sing these recitative lines, completely free, based on how you see your character, etc. And it came out to something like this. Conceptually is one thing, but then another thing is to perform it, because it takes a little bit of courage to do this, because singers are trained to be performers and soloists, and exceptional at doing that, but at least very traditionally speaking, are trained to follow orders, if you don't mind me saying so. Like from the music, you get the music, it's in front of you, and you read it, and you're supposed to do what the composer tells you to do, or what the conductor tells you to do, and then there are some moments, of course, where you can do what you want to do. But in traditional teaching, and that is not a skill you're necessarily taught to have, or acquire. So when I ask the soprano to do something like this. Okay, you can just sing it wherever. And they, normally, in my experience, then the training doesn't kick in because there isn't any to take that leap. So it took a few tries for her to sort of build up the courage to be able to do it as such. And I'm not saying that all singers are incapable of doing this. I'm just saying like the school system isn't built up to teach it. That's all I'm saying. And please disagree. That's absolutely fine. I love having a chat about these things. Learning something new. This is my experience. Next time, here we have music of the brain. Then I tried a different scoring method because I wanted to see all the music at the same time. As a conductor, you want to have a score. You want to see everything that's happening. In the piece before with the ice cube, or a block of ice, then we had the sort of singer's part in one document and then the orchestra part in another, and you didn't have a sort of overview. So I tested this method, and then this is what the conductor would have, and then here we'd have the material for, this is the alto flute, if I remember correctly, and then here we have the piano, and these are sort of mobiles. Again, you can sort of play them freely based on the atmosphere that's happening and the guidelines of the conductor. And this is the percussion. And then the singers move through these columns here in line, and it's free of time. You can do it senza misura, based on what the scene is, what the action is, etc. Yeah, and then the page turns, and there are 3 more columns for the singers. And how that sounded when we tried it for the first time was something like this.
Case notes and what my life is not my story.
You feel discarded.
Can you tell us how you feel? Do you describe your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? Do you feel one? Do you get insanely close to your experience of bitter taste or smell? Would you describe this as an aura, wave, or visual disturbance? Do you really feel distant noise? Fully close relationships, sexual dysfunction. Do you remember to take your medication for delivery? Not take your medication. Don't your medication alleviate or exacerbate your symptoms? Is this my story?
Moving on.
A list of symptoms my citer next to. They mention I am a musician, that I can no longer speak.
And that because this is quite open, how it is scored and how it combines, and there are multiple ways of how a director or a musical director could come in and sort of direct and how it combines, then what we just listened to was the 2017 trial performance, and then now we're going to listen to 2021 performance by Þórgunnur Anna Örnólfsdóttir, who will also perform it tonight. And that's when we have to go, yeah, this. And it's almost the same material, almost.
An excellent question, one that I have tried to answer. If we consult my notes.
Describe your pain.
sort of requires a group to do something like that. It's sort of where you play around, you need playfulness, you need to sort of see something on the page that is half done, and then have the playfulness and the creativity to come together as a group and be willing to sort of create something collectively in that way. And there has to be trust as well, people have to trust one another. Because it is quite vulnerable to step into that sort of a process. But I enjoy it. Right, in the festival as well, there will be 2 songs of mine, at least in the master classes. And Vetrarþoka, or Winter Fog, exists both in Icelandic and English. And the second one is Fossinen, My Waterfall, which currently is only available in Icelandic. And Vetrarþoka. We're going to listen to that together and read the score. And 2016 commission from Ranga Karadóttir, who you heard before, singing that open recitative from After the Fall, Music of the Brain. The translation of the text is: the mountainside is clothed in fog, a freezing quilt of patches, and fallen snow that sits on cracks and cuts from years ago. It breaks the skyline up ahead, a broken row of scratches, full of seeds that hold the growth which coming years will sow. So it's all about fog, and it's all about that creating the sense of being in fog in music. To me, that was an exciting compositional quest, let's call it. Let's find the recording. It's on my website. So yeah, it's in a key, but it isn't. At the same time, sort of it moves into regions where you question maybe where the key is, and you lose your way a little bit, but there's still this sort of glimmer of a direction. And sometimes I feel like I am the fog in the song, and sometimes I feel like I'm in the fog. And we have some singers who are studying this now, right? Looking forward to hearing you performing it. It's a bit, maybe a tricky song, maybe you'll prove me wrong, maybe it's easy. We'll find out. Next song that will also be in masterclasses is Fosse Min, My Waterfall. And there, and yes, My Waterfall, quite a more sort of direct, maybe symbolism in music of what a waterfall is. It's sort of the piano starts in the highest regions of the pitches and moves down and down and down. It's like a waterfall in slow motion. And we have rumblings, we have the bright little squirting of water and trying to sort of catch these colors. We are very proud of our waterfalls in Iceland. Okay.
Ég kem til þín en foss í fjarðarklettum að finna þig miðja sumartíð. Ég heilsa þér
translation. Let's go. Look at that. So it's nice to know what's being said. Oh, I didn't write it in. Silly me. Well, it's about a waterfall. Just maybe leave it at that for now. No, wait, we just had the score. That's better. Everything is under control, people. Here we go. Nope, you're not saying that. You are saying that. I come to you, my waterfall in the fjord, to be with you during high summer. I greet you, released from the shackles that have tied me down to study for a while. Your cooling relief inspires me, your cadence delivers a bath of dew. You've decorated the hillsides of green, and all grows best that stands you near. By you is nature's rest and peace. I throw myself down by your feet in song. And that's the sort of climax, the pitch climax. I sometimes visit you around noon of day and lie down by your green moss. Your sunny dew sits peacefully and dreams a dream that no one knows. And you are a poet. Your strings never rest. I throw myself down by your feet in song. And in the original, then, the word down is the long note, neder, which he sings, neder, which means down, literally. But being a poem about a waterfall, then the same word also means a rumbling. And no, I can't find the word, but that's when water really swirls and makes a lot of noise. So it's quite a nice double meaning. So she sings down while the piano does the rumbling. Excellent. We have a little bit more time. The chamber choir in Trollhättan are going to be performing a choral piece by me as well, which is called Waterfall, Spring Sun. And the translation of that poem is here. Spring sun, you awake me from my slumber and warm my being. I hear the springs and streams babble, what a serene moment. On the bank of the stream the flowers smile, so tender and pure, and a bird sings in the beautiful blue air on a green branch. And not saying that I'm old or anything, but as I grow older, and I feel I want to do more with less in my music. When I was starting with composition, then I had 20 ideas, and I shoved them all into one piece. It was really hard to listen to. And now I just want to have one idea and just see like how far can I get with that one idea. And I tried that with this piece, and I was pretty happy with it myself. Let's see what you think. And vocal and choral. Yeah, video. I don't have to find the score or anything. It's a live recording from the premiere. another important thing to me is working with emotions. When you're talking, when you're composing for a singer, performance is always there's a text, and there's music, there's a few layers of information. And I like to work with just one emotion and really get into it. And here it's sort of patience and thoughtfulness. I feel very calm right now. I hope you do too. That's it. That's all the pieces that have been performed by me in this festival, as far as I'm aware. And let's just find a closing slide.
Helgi?
Yes.
Yes, Helgi.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about your next opera, maybe?
Right.
You're doing? Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Soon, yeah.
So, I've written 6 operas, and Music of the Brain is my 5th one, and the 6th one is being premiered in Reykjavik later this month. And do I have a poster? I have to look at some. Yeah, that's fine. Does that work? Yeah. That's one of the posters, and it's called Thögnin, or The Silence. And it's about a man who is in the last sort of 5th of his life or so, and he's on his way to a funeral of a woman he used to know, and they had an affair when they were younger, and had a son that he doesn't know. And to him it's quite shameful. He had this son outside of marriage, and they haven't spoken because of that. He learns that this woman, his former lover, his son's mother, is now passing away, and he wants to go and say goodbye. He thinks, I'll probably run into my son there, I'll try to avoid that. He goes to the funeral, meets his son, of course, and the son tries to bridge this gap. Says, now I have children, we can be a family, we don't have to be alone. And in very short terms, he then goes back home. The old man thinks about it. I have this chance, will I break this cycle? And then the opera ends. So again, quite sort of focused on a particular emotion, which is shame and communication. An emotion, I know, but it's an action. And to me, that is extremely operatic, to have lived in silence for half your life and rather chosen to be alone than having a family because you feel shame. And then all of a sudden someone hands out their hand and says, you know, we can fix this, which seems like a simple act, but is absolutely massive step to take for that person. And there, in that moment where he can make that choice, to me is extremely operatic, because it's such a big emotion. No one is being stabbed, there's no blood or anything. It's not maybe sort of visual, but it's huge in here. And then we try and represent that in the music. And during all of this, his former wife, which he was married to, and they decided to not talk about this, just to live in silence. He's also passed away some years earlier. And then his former lover, they come to him as ghosts and memories, and there are thoughts about when they met and so on. So we sort of travel in time as well. And it's being rehearsed as we speak. I probably have a few messages waiting on my phone. Not that I need to rush or anything, but they might have some questions that I have to answer later. And yeah, that's what I'm working on right now in Iceland. That is. Any other questions or thoughts or topics? Yes.
I have a question and a reflection on what you said in the beginning. First, the question, you know, using these kind of boxes for the music, it's very common in instrumental music, you know, from Steve Reich and all records.
Exactly, yeah.
How do you relate to the text? To the continuity, what we understand the text?
Yes.
Because it was too small, I couldn't see the text
Sure.
in the different...
That is a good point, actually.
The music is, of course, follow and tells the story, but not probably as clear as the text that we think that we understand.
Absolutely. Let's look at this, perhaps? Yeah, it's like tiny, isn't it? Let's see.
Me at least.
Make that a little bit bigger. Let's try a different thing. Yes, so while I'm figuring this out, then I can say that so each text line is composed beforehand in pitches and sometimes rhythms. So each mobile has a sentence to say, like in musical brain. What happens in the musical brain when things fall apart is one box. And so the musical message and the text message is already defined as a unit, and it all happens in the same sequence at every time within each scene. So each scene is a contained box of mobiles. So this line is always preceded by, "You're asking me this question," but the time in between them could be very short, very long, depending on the director and the performance.
So they can't choose the order.
Not in this case.
Okay.
Exactly.
The reflection was about what you're talking in the beginning, non-active accompaniment.
Yes.
So this is, I think, also a time question, because the activity with Mozart and especially with Bach is not in that something is happening in your. It's the modulation, the tension, the relaxation from the chords in just two chords that looks like in activity, but are somehow so active.
Absolutely.
So it's a little bit how you describe it and how you see the world. So it's just a reflection of what you said, that this is non-active accompaniment. It could be very active, but not playing all the time.
Yeah. It's a problem with terminology, isn't it?
Yeah, and the time is changing it. No?
Yeah.
Now, if you, probably that would be true until Wagner. Then it's not true anymore, because he's mixing the tension. It's tension all the way, even when we go home.
Absolutely.
So that Mozart, it's
Yeah.
not that much.
I struggled many, many years finding the right words to describe it.
Yeah.
And in my doctorate defense, I was grilled for probably an hour on a very similar note you were saying.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with everything you just said. It's just sort of, for me, it really just boils down to that I was curious to just being able to have a lot happening in the orchestra while they could be directed by director in quite a sort of an open time in terms of time, etc.
Yeah.
That's really what it all boils down to.
But you could have a recitative accompagnato that's less active than the one with the two chords.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's all beautiful. It's all great. Any other questions?
Should we just, do you live in Iceland now?
I am based in England at the moment, actually. But I go to Iceland 3 times a year or so to do projects.
Because it seems as if your music is very connected to Iceland, or at least what you chose for texts. But
yeah, it's good to be away to connect to it anew. Absolutely. Then you come back after 5-6 years being studying, and then all of a sudden you go back home and everything looks different. You see it all of a sudden as a whole. It feels like, and then you miss it. You want to compose something about it. Yes.
Maybe connected to that, how do you choose the texts and narratives?
I go to a lot of antique bookstores and rummage and find poems and texts, and if I'm moved by it, I remember it, and it will be just stuck on my head. I can't remove it until I've composed it, I've set it to some sort of a tune, and then it sort of starts to live a life of its own, and then I'm free, so to speak. I think that's time. Bang on. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Yes, we look forward.